Ready.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all again. My name is Sanya Osha, and on behalf of the Director of Humor, Dr. Divine Fu, I happily welcome you all to another edition of the African Epistemologies Advanced Seminar Series. At Humor, our research institute, we have a range of seminar series we organize. Some of them include the Attire Interdisciplinary Seminar Series, the book launches. We also have the Publishing in Africa Seminar Series, in addition to the Ethical Humanitarianism Seminar Series. Today is a very special day for us because we have a very special guest, a scholar of world repute who has done a lot to establish the modern discipline we know as African philosophy. This is a scholar who has been very relentless, very persistent in spreading the gospel of African philosophy all over the world, in virtually all the continents of the world. Along with his illustrious contemporaries, such as the late Odera Oruka, and also Peter Bodwin, and the still living Kwesi Weredu, they advanced the discipline and in fact ensured that most of us have our jobs today. This is a scholar who has also published one of the most important books of the 20th century. His book, African Philosophy, Myth and Reality, has been voted consistently as one of the most important books of the 20th century. He's published other books as well, and he's served his country, Benin, in various capacities, but most notably as the Minister for Education during the period of 1990 to 1993. He was also Minister for Culture and Communication. Currently, he is Professor Emeritus of Philosophy at the National University of Benin. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and absolute honor to welcome Professor Paulin Hountondji. We'll be speaking today on a very contentious issue, the issue of indigenous knowledge systems, which he has called endogenous knowledge. Professor Hountondji, please welcome and take the floor. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for so kindly inviting me. I wish first to thank wholeheartedly the organizers of this seminar, and especially Dr. Sanya Osha. And I have just learned, I have just heard that Dr. Divine Fu is the director of humor. I thought he was still at Codestria in Dakar. Okay, so I'm happy to meet you here, Dr. Divine Fu, Mr. Director. Secondly, I wish to make a very quick remark on the vocabulary which is used in English and French In 1987, that is 34 years ago, I organized an interdisciplinary seminar at the National University of Benin in Cotonou on traditional knowledge. As an outcome of the very first discussion, it was decided to talk about endogenous knowledge instead of traditional knowledge, so as to draw attention to the origin of this kind of knowledge. Endogenous knowledge is therefore the knowledge which is supposed to come from inside the oral culture itself, as opposed to exogenous or imported knowledge. The seminar resulted in a book. This book was published by Desria, that is the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa, which was initially known as Council for the Development of Economic and Social Research in Africa, called Desria. This book then was first published in French as Les Savoirs Endogènes, piste pour une recherche. This was in 1994, and then it was published in English in 1997. That translator happens to be a brilliant and well-known writer from Ghana, Ayikwe Arma. He spontaneously translated the French title as indigenous knowledge. The fact, however, is that the word indigène, whether used as a noun or an adjective in French, has a derogatory meaning, which I think is definitely not the case in English. I insisted, therefore, I should not have insisted that the title should also be in English, endogenous knowledge. I wish to make one more remark. As editor of the volume, I wrote an introduction under the French title Démarginalisé, literally demarginalizing. But Ayikwe Arma gave a very elegant translation which meant certainly more for the English-speaking audience, recentering Africa. And even he originally wrote recentering Africa. The aim of this short paper is, in a sense, to re-explain the meaning of the original French title, Démarginalisé. So I would like to make a number of remarks under the title from ethno-philosophy to ethnoscience. And the second part of this paper would be titled Reappropriating Our Intellectual Heritage. Before I started working on indigenous knowledge, I was long concerned, as you know, with indigenous thoughts. More exactly put, I questioned again and again what I called ethno-philosophy. That is the study of indigenous thought systems hastily erected into philosophies. My interest in indigenous knowledge appeared, therefore, to many people as a kind of rehabilitation of ethno-philosophy. Even as a denial of my previous critique. Things are not that simple, however. My interest in indigenous knowledge is, in fact, in another aspect of the same struggle against marginalization. That is a critique of ethnoscience as a necessary complement to the critique of ethno-philosophy. Why? Because the ethno-philosopher reconstructs the systems of thought or the belief systems of such and such an ethnic group, such and such community. He or she does not ask the most important question: what are they worth? How far are these thought systems or belief systems, how far are they justified? How far can they be universalized? This amounts to marginalizing the belief systems of these communities or locking them into a sort of ghetto. The critique of ethno-philosophy, therefore, is a call to get out of this ghetto and an abrupt affirmation of the right to the universal. Now, the study of indigenous knowledge systems also belongs originally to the history of Western science. Of course, inside our own societies, there was an oral transmission from one generation to another of this these knowledge systems and of the whole intellectual heritage. But the systematic study of these knowledge traditions known as ethnoscience originally belongs to the history of Western science. And while the word ethnoscience itself was relatively recent, since it is known to have been coined around the middle of the 20th century. Several of the specific terms designating the sub-disciplines are old. So we find today in the scientific vocabulary not only ethnobotany, ethnozoology, and ethnomedicine. We also find ethnobiology, ethnopsychology, ethnopsychiatry, ethnolinguistics, ethnohistory, ethnomethodology, ethnosociology. There is, I remember that there used to be at the University of Abidjan an institute of ethnosociology. We also talk about ethnodemography ethnotechnology, ethnomusicology, ethnoepistemology, even ethnomathematics and ethnocuisine. What then is an ethnoscience? The word can be used in two different ways. In ethnoscience or ethnodiscipline is the study of a body of knowledge relating to a given field or a given domain of study and conveyed by oral tradition. Thus, by ethnobotany is understood the inventory of traditional knowledge on plants. By ethnozoology is understood the study of taxonomies and other traditional knowledge on animals. Ethnoscience is therefore understood first as the reconstitution of pre-existing knowledge, something like knowledge about knowledge. Then arises an inevitable question. Given the original knowledge lying in the people's tradition, what then is the specificity of the second order knowledge? What does this one add to that one? What does it bring him? Who brings what to whom and how? This is what I called, no doubt, a little awkwardly, the question of the place of knowledge. La question du lieu du savoir. Where is knowledge? Where is the real knowledge? In the primary knowledge or in its scholarly reconstruction by the ethnographer or the anthropologist? There is, however, a second use of the term ethnoscience. Thus, ethno-linguistic in the current sense of the term has never designated the inventory of some kind of linguistic knowledge of peoples of oral culture, but rather the application of linguistics as an existing discipline to examining the language practices of these peoples. Ethnodemography is also not, or not really, the inventory of demographic knowledge of peoples of oral culture. It is first and foremost the application to these peoples of the knowledge and methods of demographic survey considered to be a Western science. Ethnopsychology is just another name of what used to be called la psychologie des peuples, people's psychology, and not a study of the psychological knowledge inherent to the oral culture considered. Ethnohistory is also above all not a simple restitution of the accounts of the oral civilizations on their own past, but it is thought of as a special sector of history, a Western discipline among other Western disciplines, simply characterized by the particular nature of its documentary sources, which are, in this case, oral sources. In all these examples, ethnoscience is no longer thought of as an inventory of pre-existing knowledge, but as the extension of a discipline of the Western tradition to new fields of study linked to regions of the world and geographic territories that have remained unexplored until then. No hesitation in this case, no hesitation at all about the place of knowledge. Knowledge is supposed to reside in the mother discipline, whose coverage area is simply enlarged. Yet, things, once again, are not that simple. For instance, the ethno-historian knows perfectly well that the groups or communities he studies did not wait for his visit or for her visit to produce accounts on their own past. In the same way, the ethno-linguist knows to what extent native taxonomies, he knows or she knows to what extent native classifications of colors and flavors, plants, animals, objects in general can be, he knows how far these native classifications are sometimes perfectly conscious and subtle. At least among those we cannot call otherwise than the intellectuals, the elders, and the sages of the community. These masters of the word, often illiterate, who provide the ethno-linguist the main stuff of his learned discourse. The ethnopsychologist also is aware that the people's behavior, the people's whose behavior he discusses necessarily have their own vision of the human being, of the essential motives and the way in which he functions. What is called in the West a pharmacology, and so on and so on and so forth. So the basic question remains, where is knowledge? Is it in the original? Is it in the primary knowledge inherent in the oral culture, or the learned reconstitution or reconstruction or analysis of this primary knowledge by the Western or the westernized scientist? What is what should also be noted is that in his approach or her approach to the so-called traditional or indigenous knowledge, the ethnologist usually avoids one question, the question of truth. That is the question of both the theoretical validity and practical efficiency of exotic knowledge systems. How true are they? The ethnobotanist studies the indigenous classifications of plants in themselves and for themselves. The ethnozoologist is just interested in identifying a given taxonomy as the taxonomy of such or such ethnic group. He does not ask how true, how objectively true it is. So, for the ethnoscientist, these original knowledges are just products of language, among others. Art works among other artworks. I would say that their approach is above all aesthetic, purely descriptive and analytical, concerned with restoring or reconstructing the internal logic of given systems of collective representations without the slightest concern about the objectivity, the objective validity of these representations. I think I have been talking too long and too much. Now, if a pharmacologist happens to notice among the results of an ethnobotanical investigation, if he or she comes to notice some indications concerning the medicinal use of a plant for the treatment of a given disease, his first move, his or her first move would be not only to verify the information itself, but to test the practical effectiveness of the treatment. And if this effectiveness is established, his instinct or her instinct would be to carry out the chemical and biochemical analysis, the measurements and the dosages necessary to isolate the active substance, and so on and so forth. So, let me conclude, because I have already been too long. My conclusion would be, and this summarizes what I wanted to say in the second part of this talk, under the title Reappropriating Our Intellectual Heritage. Let us be not only ethnobotanists, the ethnobotanists who gives information to the pharmacologists. Let us struggle to be pharmacologists ourselves. Collective development is only possible if we can do that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Hountondji. I think we would have a lot of questions and reactions. I can see a number of show of hands. And so if you'll be kind enough to entertain those questions and comments, we'll be happier that you were able to join us today. I saw Divine indicate that he wanted to say something. Divine.
No, Sanya, sorry, not now. We just asking colleagues to please type out their names, full names. We know this is a border, but for security reasons, so that we can have safe Zoom meetings, please rename yourself with your full name so that we can actually have an engaged conversation with Professor Paulin Hountondji, whom we thank really, really deeply for the time that he has dedicated, to be here. So thank you.
Okay, we can see Tutu Zeleka. Tutu Zeleka.
Yes.
Indicated that you wanted to ask. Yes. Go on.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am, because Zoom protocol in terms of needing to expose myself, so I might as well introduce myself. I am Pruzerani Mvimbi, a master's candidate in political philosophy, African political philosophy to be precise, here at the University of the Western Cape. Thank you very much, Prof, for giving us an interesting account of ethno-philosophy. And I have to admit that, hearing one of the greatest figures of philosophy in the continent, providing, intellectual, brief regarding philosophy and ethno-philosophy to be precise, it's quite intellectually moving and it's quite sound. Prof, I've got many concerns. Probably my concern first and foremost stems with how you understand, or rather the kind of critique that you probe, with regards to African ethno-philosophy. But there's one, I think there are two things, and the third one would be bonus, Prof, hear me out. The first suggestion, or rather comment, is that you claim that ethno-philosophy reconstructs beliefs, indigenous belief systems. And it appears that you are critiquing ethno-philosophy on those bases, which then leads me to think about ethno-philosophy first and foremost as a scientific inquiry to knowledge production. And you make this distinction between ethno-philosophy and ethnoscience, which for me, both are two of the same kind. Why? Because they are rigid. In what sense? They provide a standard in which we can or we should measure knowledge production, one. Secondly, which then is a question, Prof, have you ever considered ethno-philosophy as an engagement with everyday thought processes that are produced in traditional systems? Now, when I make reference to traditional systems, I'm simply tapping into culture, my culture, as a Xhosa speaking from South Africa in the rural parts of the country. So to what extent can we think about ethno-philosophy as giving agency to marginalized thought that is ingrained within cultural thought systems or within cultural proverbs? Thirdly, Prof, you pose a very interesting question, which is
sorry.
where is knowledge?
Sorry. Can I just come in? Can you make your comments a bit brief so that we can take some other questions so that I think we're also running out of time. So
okay, the last question.
Okay.
Prof, you ask, where is knowledge? Without asking, does knowledge exist? So can you please also tap into that, because you're assuming that there is knowledge, but then does knowledge really exist? And if so, if knowledge does exist, where is knowledge?
Prof, would you like to take one or two more questions so that we, and then so that you can all respond? I see two hands up. Nanjala, Nairobi, would you ask your question? And after that, Antonio would ask.
Thank you. My question is to do with applications, I guess, of the approaches that you've pointed out. To what extent does having a grounding ethno-philosophy in studying the traditions, traditional knowledge practices, traditional knowledge generation, constrict our ability to develop frameworks that, or enable, because it could constrict and could enable our ability to develop frameworks for thinking about the present, the future? Like, must it be, or must we look back in order to find that forward orientation, or is there a way that you see in your framework that we can use these techniques, use these approaches for thinking about the problems and the opportunities of the present and the future?
Thank you. Antonio, I think Antonio wanted to ask a question. That will take 3 questions and then Prof can respond to all 3 of them. Aidas, did I pronounce it well? Aidas, yes, you may ask a question. Thank you.
Oh, may I?
So, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Hello. I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name if I did.
Oh, you can pronounce it anyhow. You can say Aida, Aidas, pronounce the S or not. I'm fine with both of them. So, hi, my name is Aida, and I'm a lecturer in social anthropology at the Centre Universitaire de Manga in Burkina Faso. Thank you so much. I'm currently teaching a course called Anthropology of Knowledge to 2nd-year students at the bachelor level. So this is a very timely presentation, which I enjoyed very much. And I have a very short question. How exactly do we tell 21st century students or African students that, yes, they are hybrids, yes, we are surrounded by everything that is Western, but yet we have to be proud of our knowledge, and we have to constantly be aware that there's no one knowledge that is above the other, and there's just one knowledge anywhere, no matter the society or the culture. Thank you.
Prof, yes, you might respond to all 3 of them now. Unmute yourself, Prof, please. You're muted. Unmute yourself, please. Okay. I think you need to unmute yourself, Prof.
It's okay now?
Yes, it is.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it is.
First, I would be very grateful if Dr. Sonia Osha could resume these questions, because I did not hear very well, or if Mr. rector could, I am not sure that I understood.
I think they just want more elaborations.
Yes.
About the relationship between traditional knowledges and
Yes.
science. And especially the first speaker was saying, for instance, a lot of local knowledges are also a reflection of our cultures. And so there should be that in every culture, they are embedded in them local knowledges. And so do we say those are not knowledges because they're not hegemonic or they're not dominant? And so, yeah, so I think those are the questions, because I mean, inherent in every culture, how,
okay,
either dominant or dominated, there are knowledges. And I think that we ought to, how do we treat those knowledges, even though we're working within a largely Western paradigm?
Actually, what I mean is that we should not be satisfied with the present situation. The situation prevailing in most African countries. And there are a few interesting, there are a few important exceptions. What you have been doing in South Africa, for instance, for a number of years, is important for us, is important for all Africa. You have a national program in valuing and promoting and what you call IKS, the indigenous knowledge system. And I have a book here edited by Catherine Odora Hoppers, and indigenous knowledge and the integration of knowledge systems. And what I mean, it is exactly what we have to do. Instead of the dumb juxtaposition of indigenous or so-called indigenous knowledge systems and modern science, we have to integrate the so-called IKS into actual scientific research, actual modern scientific research, which we are conducting in our universities, in our laboratories, in our research centers. We should not have modern science on one side and so-called indigenous knowledge system on the other side. And the real problem is how we can do that, how we can, by which methods we can integrate the knowledge traditions inherited from our culture, and some elements, some aspects are true, some others are false, and we have to verify, and we have to set up the adequate means and ways to verify and to test the knowledge inherited. And that is Catherine Odora Hoppes talks about, well, the subtitle of this book is Towards a philosophy of articulation. And instead of being just the people talked about, we should become the talking people and the knowing people. We should become active. And as far as indigenous system of thought is concerned, well, that is exactly what my critique of ethno-philosophy aims at. Traditional thought exists, of course. It does exist. And what we need to do is to develop a free and critical relationship to the value system, the knowledge system, the modes of thought inherited from our culture. Because, of course, there are things that that appeared good in the past. There are things that appear that used to appear as normal. Well, and even though historical research should pay attention to the divergent opinions, the divergent voices within the culture itself. Let me give an example. There was a king of the Dahomey, my own country. And they say that when he died, 41 of his spouses were buried alive with him to accompany him and to continue to serve him in the beyond. And there was a strong competition among his spouses to be selected, because it was an honor for them. I am not sure that the mothers of these spouses were that happy. I am not sure either that the secret lovers, if any, of these princesses were happy. So we should be very careful when we say that this was universally admitted by everyone in the Fond society of the 19th century. The African historian of today should investigate in the voices of the minority of that time. So the so-called traditional society is itself plural. And we should investigate into the plurality of norms and ideas. Okay, and I do not say that traditional thought is bad or that it does not exist. I say that we should appropriate or reappropriate traditional knowledge as well as traditional belief systems in a free and critical way, because what is most important for us today is to build a better future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And that was really elaborate, that was rich, and it's a great companion piece to your lecture. And I think it addressed a lot of the questions, at least the first batch of questions that were asked to you. And, you know, like I said, the elaborations were quite succinct and quite at least not as complicated as your lecture itself. So we thank you so much for that. I think we have one or two more questions. We'll just take them and then we'll end the session because we are already out of time. But because of the very special occasion and the very special guest we have, I think we should indulge ourselves just a little more. Sunny, I saw your hands up for a long time. Are you still present in the room?
And Sonia, the questions also in the chat. I think colleagues wrote their questions in the chat to just
Okay.
type.
Would they?
Yes. If
Would
you could
they
just
be
read
willing
aloud.
to?
There is a question from Sipoy Saveswa, and there is another from Aidas. If you just read.
Aidas has, I think Prof responded to Aidas in her presentation because she asked, but Sunny wanted to ask the question. Yes. If there are no questions, anyone who typed something in the chat room can indicate by a show of hands if they want to. Okay. Isu, okay. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Hountondji, for your lovely presentation. My question is in the chat box, but just to paraphrase what I have said, the question for me becomes, after everything that you have said, and also in some of the books that you have written, to what extent are we then, especially in the so-called global South, trying to play catch up with the global North? The fact that we have to plug our ways of being, our knowledge systems into scientific frameworks that have already been developed. To what extent are we just playing catch up with the global North? Maybe call me an anarchist that believes to say that we people in the global South can come up with our own systems of being, and they are adopted as they are. To what extent are we just playing catch up? And maybe adding on to that, sorry, because of time, to say, is it even possible to develop our own systems without centering the global North in this conversation?
Sorry, Prof, let me see if we have one or two more questions so that you take them as a batch. Any more questions? Okay, Prof, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Prof, please.
But I need you to, can you resume? Can you summarize?
What was said was that
Isu's question.
What was said that because of the differences between the developing world and the highly advanced worlds in terms of knowledge systems, in terms of how they are positioned, that we find ourselves in the developing world trying to play catch up. So how feasible or how appropriate is this, trying to play catch up with the very highly advanced countries with the advanced systems of technology, education and what have you, that we're at a disadvantaged position. So how feasible is it? What is it? Is it appropriate to go in that direction?
I don't think that we have to catch up. The most that we have to catch up the most advanced countries. I don't think that. I think we have to go our own way. And we have to go our own pace. But we must know that we have to appropriate freely whatever can be useful for us in the existing international heritage, in the existing intellectual heritage available in the world. We are entitled to make this heritage ours as far as we can, because actually we have been, we have historically contributed to the building up of this heritage. At the same time, we have to become more and more aware of our own heritage, our own indigenous or endogenous heritage. And we have to unify all these heritages within our society. I don't think there are, these countries are more advanced than ours, or this should not be a problem. This should not be a problem. The real problem is among ourselves. If you live, for instance, under a local dictatorship in a country where you do not feel secure, where you know that you can be arrested for absolutely no reason, or for artificial reasons, you don't feel safe. You know, the real problem for us is to build a future that is better than today. And I ask a question which I am unable to answer myself when I speak of, when I evoke the dictatorial regimes under which some of us are living. It is a problem, of course, and I have no solution for that. Now, countries or cultures or civilization, scientific cultures, technological cultures, which are more advanced than ours. This, to me, is not the primary concern. It is just a secondary concern. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that also very detailed explanation. I think it addresses a lot of the concerns and questions we have. So those of us who are going to pose and those of us who didn't pose. And so we will be gradually rounding up. I'll be thanking you from now to the end for the very interesting engagement. I think Divine wants to say something about the book, Endogenous Knowledge, Research Trails. Divine, you indicated you wanted to say something about the book.
Yes, Sanya, just, first to thank Professor Paulin Hountondji for the privilege and the honor, of being in this space and allowing us to drink from his intellectual mind and also experience. So we really feel privileged, and you're very influential for some of us and also in some of our work. And we hope that we'll continue to carry on these conversations, after this, and it will not be the last time that we have you here. I have just indicated in the chat that Professor Hountondji has revised, published an edition of Endogenous Knowledge, Research Trails. I've put the link in the chat box, and which you can order both from Codesria and also from the African Book Collective, and also sure if you engage Professor Hountondji himself, you will be able to order some of that book. So we do encourage many people to re-engage that book that we are re-engaging. So that's the first thing. The second relates to a campaign at the Faculty of Humanities. We are an institute for humanities, and we are encouraging colleagues and also the public, to support the arts and the performing arts. The Baxter Theatre, which is in Rondebosch, as part of the University of Cape Town, is currently struggling because of COVID-19 lockdowns, and we're encouraging people to support the Baxter Theatre, but not just the Baxter Theatre, but also artists, across the continent, who are struggling to continue to do this other alternative knowledge that Professor Hountondji is talking about. And I think that Professor Hountondji's work emphasizes the fact that knowledge is incomplete unless we bring together other forms and other alternative ways of thinking. So we're encouraging people to support the arts. And lastly, just to apologize, to colleagues who are participating. We are struggling with security issues on Zoom. It's not just with us, but with many other platforms. So we do encourage colleagues who participate in our activities to please come on board with your full names and affiliation, just so that we can all identify you and feel safe, and interact in this space. We might have kicked off some people. We do apologize for that, but we'll do our best to continue to be safe. But thank you again, for being here, and thank you, Professor Hountondji, for the honor and privilege that you do us. Yeah, merci beaucoup.
Okay. Well said, but I should also thank you to especially for this very engaged and very detailed presentation. Having known your work for several years and followed it, there's a consistency in your ideas. Your convictions are well known, and you are never afraid, and you never shy to push and advance your views. Always we might not all agree with them, but they are consistent, they are vigorous, they are bold, and most of the time they illuminate the field of our discipline. They have been some of the most important body of work produced by an African philosopher, and it's a real privilege and honor to have you here and to share your ideas once again, which you never fail to do when called upon. We thank you so much for your time We thank you for your vision. We thank you for your energy. We thank you for your generosity. And so we come to the end of another edition of our African Epistemologists Advanced series. And we look forward to seeing you again shortly, quite soon. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.